And what I've asked everybody on the table up here is to talk about whatever they want to talk about, because that's what we'll do anyhow. But also, where they can, especially if they attended both days, to give us a little bit of feedback on wetland culture and wetlands being used to clean water and all this stuff that we've covered. So we're supposed to be reacting to, for the benefit of all, it will be all recorded. See that camera in the back? So we remember what they say, and we'll probably write it down somewhere too. So we're looking for feedback, but we also are looking for their perspective. They're all Ph.D.s, and so they're smart people, so we're looking forward to hearing their reactions. So I'll just start with Lisa KORTE. Lisa is the brand new sanctuary director at Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary in Naples, Florida. So welcome. Go ahead, please. Sorry.
Great. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for sticking through to the bitter end. I think one of my reactions is, as a new person to Naples and a new sanctuary director, is just to see the enthusiasm for water issues and to see such a great crowd here. And I was really impressed with all the questions with the policy panel yesterday, as well as at the end of the session. So that, as a scientist, gives me a lot of enthusiasm and feel very welcome here. And tonight I'll talk just a little bit from the perspective of Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary, which is a wetland. It's about 30 miles from here. It's 15 miles east of the Mazury exit on 75. If you haven't been out there, I encourage you to come out there. And it's basically 13,000 acres, and our real point of pride is our bald cypress wetland, as well as marsh wetlands and a little bit of upland pine. So I'm coming from this from the perspective of managing a large natural wetland. And just one of the other comments from the policy panel yesterday from Chauncey Goss I thought was really interesting, this idea of looking at the impact of people on the environment, but then also how the environment impacts people. And I think that really set the stage for a lot of the topics we're talking about today. So what is our impact on wetlands? And then when things go wrong, how does that environment impact us, with Dr. Lee really addressed today. So I thank Dr. Mitch for bringing together such a great panel. It really brings a lot of different threads together. I think another thing that really made an impact on me yesterday was Daniel Andrew, and the captain of Clean Water, when he talked about being 29 years old and watching a fishery collapse in his lifetime. That is just, to be at such a young age and to see that happen already really is a call to action. And I loved his call to action by going around and knocking on different people's doors and bringing the scientists together. I thought that was really striking when he was saying how, when I was talking to the scientists and when I was talking to the legislators and decision makers in Tallahassee, I was hearing two different stories. And so I really credit him and admire his tenacity to get the scientists and the policymakers together. And I think that's so important. Kind of looking at last night, where I liked the idea of presenting some solutions to issues, but I also liked the whole idea of looking at the business side of it. So where's Sean Miller? You're back in the corner. It's not always this early in the game that scientists and entrepreneurs come together. And so I found that a really striking, a good thing to be doing right at the beginning of these conversations, and looking at both the science, but okay, if this science works, how do we make it marketable? And from that, then I'd also say that tonight was kind of the other side of it. Like yesterday, it was like, here's the grand idea, but now we've got the graduate students who are down in the field figuring it out and actually doing it. And so I liked how Bing Bing really gave us the whole idea of, okay, here's what we're seeing on these initial stages. And hydrology, I asked specifically that question about what's the biggest challenge, and you answered hydrology, which is exactly the biggest challenge we have in our natural wetlands. Out at Corkscrew, we've just done an analysis of 60 years of hydrology data, so looking at our water levels over 60 years, And we're seeing over the last 20 years that we are having changes where our dry season water levels are staying low for longer periods. And so, we are looking at the similar questions and having similar challenges. So I found that really interesting as I look at what are the challenges we're facing in our existing wetlands, and then how do you, if you're going to be creating or restoring wetlands, are you going to have similar challenges? And also in terms of just looking at the work by Lauren, again, looking at the scale of that in terms of Hurricane Irma. We have hurricanes here, and even designing things, like you're saying that you've got changes that, a hurricane event may overcome the system. And even out at Corkscrew with Hurricane Irma, our boardwalk was flooded. I mean, we were looking at high water levels, and so as we're looking to solve some of these problems and think about solutions, we can't only look at averages, we also have to be prepared for those other scenarios. And so I find it interesting that we're seeing similar parallels with these proposed wetlands as well as natural wetlands. And I'd also say that for me, I think while I like this idea of creating wetlands and trying to restore wetlands, it also emphasizes how important our existing wetlands are. Yesterday, Dr. Mitch was talking about how 87% of wetlands have been lost throughout the world. That's incredible. And it makes those ones that are still here, like Corkscrew, Hatchet, Big Cypress, Everglades, they're that much more important because they still exist. And I think finally, I won't take up too much time, but I'd also say that this cover, I think, is really important too, in terms of really looking at how you manage landscapes. This idea that it's a mosaic, and also talking about biodiversity. And what we found, years of study on biodiversity really speak highly of how you need to have diverse systems. Monocultures are not going to give you the same benefits that you get from biodiversity. So looking at a mosaic and really thinking about things at a landscape level is incredibly important.
All right, we'll have everybody give an introductory remarks, and then we'll open it wide open for discussion. All right, I need another microphone. Okay, our next guest in the order that's listed in the program, Nathan Waltham, is a visiting scholar at the Everglades Wetland Research Park as of 2 days ago. And when he walked in the door, I said, "Oh, you're going to be on the panel, right?" I had actually arranged it with him by email a couple of days before. But you got to be careful when you're a visiting scholar here. You never know where you're going to end up. Nathan comes from Australia. He comes from James Cook University in Queensland, Australia. And he's, by the way, going to be giving the last Movement on the March lecture on the 5th of March. That will be our final Movement on the March lecture. You come and hear lots of details about, you have to tell me what the subject matter is, basically the Great Barrier Reef. So we're going to hear about that. So he's also, I got to give his title too. He is, in addition to being a visiting scientist here, he's a lecturer in Coast Estuary Science and Management, College of Science and Engineering, James Cook University, Queensland, Australia. Nathan, welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mitch. It's actually been a long time coming to visit you, and I don't know whether I'll come back again within 2 days being asked to be on the panel. I think maybe next time I might think it through more carefully. No, just showing. Yeah, so 37 hours on a plane, 4 planes I took to arrive here, and I'm here in the US as part of the Queensland Government Smithsonian Fellowship, which is offered to only a few people every year. And it's an opportunity to exchange professionals in the field of science, research, between the US and Smithsonian and also Queensland Government. So I'm here to learn how coastal restoration is done, because we in Australia need to really think this very carefully, how we go about managing our coastal wetland ecosystems. My position, my role is on the doorstep of the Great Barrier Reef, or maybe the not so Great Barrier Reef, we should maybe start to say it as. And the Great Barrier Reef is, and I'll talk more about this in the Moon on the Marsh, but it's, you know, it's the icon in our national estate. Great Barrier Reef. It is worth so much money to the tourism, to our the cultural values, the economy, and it is under a lot of stress. It is under a lot of stress. Such that only an hour ago I got a text message from a colleague saying that the third wave of coral bleaching is about to be announced. So this is 3 years, so 3 times in the last 5 or 6 years we've had coral bleaching on the Great Barrier Reef. There's a whole range of reasons for that, but we know it's about water quality, we know it's about climate change, but water quality is something that we can possibly do something about. Restoring our wetlands, taking back some of our agricultural development, our urban development, managing that better, we should hopefully give the Great Barrier Reef a chance. So I'm really pleased to be here. I've been really impressed with the number of people that have come along to this event, and I'm expecting that this is the norm now for any events I go to. We wouldn't see this number of people, this number of passionate people at events in Australia, some of the events I go to. So I really applaud you guys for coming 2 days. This is 2 days, I can't believe it. So well done. The quality of the speakers I've been entirely impressed with. I think I've got lots of science questions that I'll target the speakers over the next 2 weeks while I'm here. Hopefully learn a lot more about what you're doing and what you've done to be successful, I guess. I have probably a couple of key points that I recorded, I guess, across the last 2 days. The first is that coastal wetlands, what we're talking about here, are under a lot of stress. They are absolutely under a lot of stress. We know that. The UN last year declared the decade we're about to go into, 2021 to 2030, is the decade of ecosystem restoration. The UN have declared that. The UN are saying at that highest level, enough is enough. We need to start restoring our ecosystems, our coastal ecosystems. Absolutely. And Bill and I just published a paper this week on what that actually means if you're an aquatic ecologist. And what it means is there's lots of unknowns. We have no idea how to really restore coastal wetlands successfully. There's good examples, but how do we take that to the scale that we really need to get serious about protecting our coastal wetland systems? We don't know. We need more science. Absolutely. And the science is coming, the data's been collected, but we need to really scale that up, without a doubt. Variability in climate is a huge unknown. How can we expect in the next 10 years to restore our aquatic ecosystems, our coastal systems, with all these unknowns? That's the vision. So the paper that we just published this week, that Bill and I and others published, was around that we have to get quite serious about this. We need to have governments, we need to have community, we need to have industry, all talking and working together. This is a multidisciplinary approach that is needed. It is not just scientists, it's not community, it's not government, it's not industry. We are all part of this. And that was the point of the paper that we just had released. That's pretty exciting for us. In the Great Barrier Reef world of things, we're going to be a bit controversial here and say that we are talking now about a reduced level of ecosystem service. The barrier reef is under a lot of pressure. So can we ever expect it to be as good as it is right now? We are on a trajectory of decline. So do we have to accept there's going to be parts of the Great Barrier Reef that are damaged? And in doing that, we'll protect other areas. So that's actually quite a confronting thought to think about. I don't know whether I necessarily agree with that, but you know, this is the world that we live in. Another point that I'll make is, and I'm impressed with the students up the back there, you guys should be up the front though, because you are the future leaders. Absolutely. We have champions in coastal wetland ecology, and we need more champions coming through. So I'd really like to applaud the students in the room that you've come for the 2 days, that's great. But you know what, we're handing the baton over to you at some point very soon to take charge and keep moving forward. So, you know, it's fantastic you were here, and I really applaud that you embrace the opportunities you've had today and yesterday to learn from some of the really leaders in the field and take forward these challenges as we have. So well done. The last point I'll make is, you know, who's going to pay for this? Who's going to pay for all this? Can we expect government to pay for all this? In Australia, that's not going to happen. Maybe that's the case here, I'm not sure. So I was really inspired with the talk last night from Sam about these alternative funding mechanisms, how we could really scale up and fund these restoration projects that we need. And we're having those same discussions right now in Australia. We're looking at non-traditional funding sources, so public-private investor schemes through carbon, through water quality or biodiversity, and it's getting a lot of traction. I've had meetings with the CEO of Qantas, who wants to fund restoration projects on the Great Barrier Reef. Every time we jump in a plane and tick a box to say we want to offset our carbon for $2 or $3 Australian, that's about $10 US because of the exchange rate. That money is sitting there, and we need to open those pipelines up and use that to fund restoration. That's one example. So I actually think that for our future leaders at the back, the students, I think you guys are at a very, very wonderful point in your career. There's so many opportunities coming up in this space of restoration. So really take hold of the opportunity that you have. To Bill, I'd really like to say thanks for the opportunity. I know I've gone over time. And thanks very much.
Again, I'm repeating, but Nathan will be giving the Moonlight on the March lecture 2 weeks from yesterday, I think, right? On the 5th of March. You've got to come and listen about the Great Barrier Reef. Okay? I think you're leaving the next day, aren't you?
On the Saturday after. Yeah, there's 6. Yeah, 2 days.
Yeah, why not? Okay, you have the slides ready to me? Okay, I'm now introducing another unsuspecting visiting scholar. JULITA DUNALSKA is from Poland. Now she had more time. I told her 2 weeks ago that she would be on this panel, and she's been here since what? Almost the beginning of January. Yeah, and she's here for 4 months. And she's a visiting scholar she's professor of water protection engineering, University of Warmia and Mazury. And boy, I can't pronounce your city. Olsztyn.
In Olsztyn.
That's not bad, Olsztyn, Poland. And so this is what we're doing at this place all the time. We have international scholars just coming through here by the dozens. And so we're just very delighted to have you here. And I guess you have a couple of slides to show, is that right? Okay, welcome, JULITA.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. Thank you, Professor Mitch, for this invitation. Precipitation in workshop has made me more sure that the wetlands can be very useful to reduce nutrients. I think that the solutions presented here are very important because we can reduce about 50% of nitrogen and about and more 90% of phosphorus. In comparison, different methods of lake restoration and lake protection, it is significant. What is another profit from this kind of solution? When we accumulate nutrients in wetlands, we decreasing run of nutrients to natural waters, reducing cost of mitigating algae blooms, and carrying human health risk. But for me, it's very important that such an approach is effective because it focuses on the root of the problem, not only on mitigation of effects. Why I try to explain this by using an example from Poland. European Union Water Framework Directive commits us to achieve the good status of water ultimately by 2027. We know that it's rather impossible, but of course we try to do something. But local authorities want to restore lakes without cutting sources of pollution in a catchment. This is a wrong way. I say if, like a scientist, but also a person who implement a lot of lake restoration methods, I can say that I am the third generation of scientists who are working at the improvement of lake restoration, because the first all over the world method of lake protection was applied in Poland in 1956 at KORTE lake that is located at my university. So I can study this lake every day. We have a lot of term data, and we are really working a lot about the lake restoration. So this example, in my opinion, is really important. This is a micro scale, but this kind of systems, water systems, work at the same way all over the world. When we look at this lake, so we have here 4 lakes connected with the river. But local scientists, they want to restore this lake in the middle. They have applied a lot of methods, like a high polymerization, phosphorus inactivation, and others methods, and spent a lot of money. But the lake is in terrible condition, with a huge primary production, huge algae blooms, and I tried to explain them what is wrong with this kind of action. 25 water samples were taken from the shore of the lake. Usually the sites are connected with storm water. And when we look at the load of phosphorus in this system, we can see that the inflow, the load of total phosphorus in kilograms per year, the inflow to the second lake is about 50 kilograms per year, but the outflow more than 4 kilograms. Why a big difference? Of course, the lake is very eutrophic with a huge primary production. Phosphorus is removed from the bottom deposits, but also receive sewage from the catchment. Here should be stormwater, but it's sewage. Like a illegal way. So this terrified me because people know about this and they don't do anything. When we look at another lake, the inflow is more than 400 kilograms phosphorus, but the outflow is twice bigger. And again, the same situation. In stormwater, we observe the sewage. And again, people know what is going, but they don't do anything. So when we look at the load of phosphorus, we can see that phosphorus and nitrogen is rising from lake to lake very fast. And when we want to restore these fart lakes, of course we can look at all systems and we should cut off all sources of pollution. This sentence is very important for me. In a case of lack of reduction of the external sources of pollution, the restoration in the reservoir is not effective because it does not give the chance to sustainable improvement of water. We also should, in this context, I am really sure that nutrient capture and block in the landscape with wetlands and wetland culture can be one of the most effective ways to limit the eutrophication of surface water and algae blooms. I also want to say that modern protection, in my opinion, and restoration of water, it's first of all the scientific knowledge and new technology, but also integrated strategy, short-term and long-term goals, collaboration and co-responsibility of policy makers, water managers, local authorities and local communities. And new tools, we can use the new tools for restoration management like modeling, monitoring by using, for example, the high-frequency data and applying citizen science. And of course, maybe more in Polish condition, more effective and enforced legal regulation. So thank you so much for your attention.
Testing, okay. All right, it's up to you guys now. We're going to have questions in it from the audience or discussions in the audience.
I still have things to say, though.
Oh.
It's going to get funny now if the building has
Okay, EVERHAM is actually a very good friend of mine. He's at FGCU. He was the most welcoming professor when I came here 8 years ago that I can ever imagine. And he's just been a great friend. We had a lot of fun, and I will talk about this for the next decade. I'm forgetting him. But when, now you're stopping it. And there's a reason he's on last. Not a reason I forgot you, but a reason I'm on last, because he'll stir the pot. I know you will.
So I was the one that started that awkward clap when Bill said, when he called Lauren his captain of his Navy, because I thought he meant it beautifully and metaphorically, and I thought it deserved to be clapped. I didn't realize he meant literally. Lauren, I think of you metaphorically as a captain of his Navy, and that's why I clapped. One of my graduate students is in the back. Irma, can you start the timer, because I can go long, and it's late on a Friday. 5 minutes. Got it. Okay, thank you.
All right.
So I'll talk a little bit about my impressions from tonight. I did see the presentations that I missed yesterday up in Ohio, and I was on the same kind of a panel at the end of the workshop in Ohio. But before I talk about that, I do want to mention what I think maybe is the best idea I ever had, that we don't have a football team at FGCU, so I started 3 years ago, maybe, doing tailgate for science. before good science talks. I haven't been able to do it all this spring because I have a Thursday night class, but March 5th we're on spring break. So we're going to do a tailgate for science starting at 5:30. I've heard that Buckeyes know how to tailgate. I don't have any evidence of that. And we can show this guy from Australia how to barbecue. 5:30 out in the parking lot, tailgate for science. All right. I'm a disturbance ecologist. I'm interested in how irregular events shape ecosystems. The idea is to understand how they change through time and to be able to manage them better. So I actually would have been delighted to be in Bill's lab before Irma for that conversation. I stayed on campus. I hid out in one of the science buildings, trying to not have the cops find me and kick me out, because I wanted to see how the trees responded to the wind. That's what I am interested in. And like Bill, I was trained as a systems ecologist. Once I figured out that my study site, the thing that I wanted to study, which was the planet Earth, only had a sample size of 1, I turned to computer models as a way to simulate complex systems dynamics and to try to understand change through time, to try to work towards solutions. And sometimes computer models can guide us towards that movement from correlation to causation. And so they can be an important tool. I got to Southwest Florida in 1996, the year before FTCU opened. Early on, I was trying to remember, Brad, if it was you. Somebody pulled me aside and said, listen, I got to tell you something about the environmental community in Southwest Florida. When the going gets really bad, we pull the wagons in a circle, we get out our guns, and we point them all to the middle, and we shoot at each other. 24 years ago, this Elkington's idea of the triple bottom line was just emerging, in the literature. And at that time, I know a lot of people who dye their hair like I do will remember this. There were 2 tribes. You were either on the side of the environment or you were on the side of the economy. And we spent time suing each other. That's the way we did business, a quarter of a century ago. And some of us are still stuck in that particular world. So I want to reemphasize what Lisa said. One of the most exciting things I've seen about this wet culture approach was Sam's presentation up in Ohio, but I'm sorry I missed yesterday. If we can make money while we save the planet, we will save the planet. We have to look at ways of using market forces to change behavior. We just have to. And we've got to move beyond that idea that we're in 2 different tribes and all we can do is sue each other. In 2018, when the harmful algal blooms got bad, again, I'm a disturbance ecologist, and I was delighted. Not so much because of the bad stuff that was happening, but I thought, okay, this is going to be it, right? This is going to teach everybody that water connects us across the landscape, and that we're all in this together, and that we're going to be able to work out solutions. And so we pulled the wagons in a circle, and we got out the guns, and we pointed them upstream at agriculture, and we blamed them. That's an incomplete understanding of this landscape, you guys. You have to accept that. Who was here last night? Okay, so I also, as Bill said, might say stuff that's going to make you mad. That's okay. I think part of the solution is going to be that we have to argue. I think we also have to listen. I think part of the solution is we have to sue some people. And we have to elect better leaders. And I also think part of the solution is going to be creative, out-of-the-box technical solutions, some of which you've seen in the last 2 days. I also think part of the solution is going to be cultural and spiritual. Got to really change the way we think about how we fit ourselves onto the landscape. Remember, how am I doing? Do not start the timer. Here's what I know from my 24 years in Southwest Florida. People are going to keep moving here. We aren't going to build a wall. We aren't going to stop development. Only thing we might do is effectively mismanage the land so that our beaches are always filled with dead fish and that our golf courses are flooded by sea level rise. That might work. But short of that, we got to figure out what we're going to do about the fact that people move here. And when they move here, they need places to live. And I think the solution is not stopping development. I think it's stopping bad development and guiding us towards better development. Some of which you can see from these applications of wetland nutrient reduction technologies. We can put more of that on the landscape. We can build it into our neighborhoods. People also have to eat. I think there are landscapes on the planet where food comes from far away. I think in the long run they're not going to be sustainable. I grew up in Detroit. Dr. Lee, I just got to say, go blue. People who have gone through the last generation in Detroit, Michigan, understand that if you put all of your economic eggs in one basket, it's incredibly fragile. We need to continue to have agriculture on this landscape. We need to grow food here. We need to grow beer here. We need to grow hemp here and make clothes out of it. We should start manufacturing solar panels on this landscape. Diversity in ecological systems leads to resistance and resilience. Diversity in economic systems leads to resistance and resilience. So please don't think of agriculture as the only problem, because we are all part of the problem. If you grow a lawn, you're part of the problem. We are also all part of the solution. We can't fix what we broke. I think Nathan's wrong. I think the UN's wrong. It's not the decade of restoration, it's the century of restoration. This is the century where we will fix what we broke. It won't be easy, it won't be fast, it won't be cheap. But we're smart people, not this people here, we're smart people. Our species is pretty good and creative and smart once we figure out what the problem is. And there's things we could do and we'll fix it. And I'll end there and use that as bait if you want to ask me what. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And that, you nailed it. Now, I can turn to the audience and suggest that anybody has any questions. We have one mic. Let's deal with one. There you go. Okay, I don't need one.
We don't need you.
You don't need me. So, questions from the audience provoke some discussion.
I can ask her.
Well, it's been a bit.
In Australia, on the Great Barrier Reef, the keys here just ban certain sunscreens. Have you looked at the sunscreens that people who go out there on the barrier reef?
We have, yes. I'd probably just add to that, we're a population of 25 million people.
Yes.
We're a very, very small population, so I think it is a problem. I think the scale of the problem isn't quite there. I think things like nutrients and pesticides and those other things are far more important. Climate change is far more important on the reef than sunscreen at the moment.
But people who are going out to the barrier reef have sunscreen on.
That's right, yes. Yep.
This is not big on the Australian type, but I do have a question. Lauren earlier discussed the issue around some of the natural disasters that we have in Florida, mainly hurricanes. You guys have just experienced a pretty significant natural disaster with the fires, and I would expect there's going to be some kind of downstream problem from runoff as a result of all of that disaster. What do you see coming as it's going to affect the area around the country in general?
Yeah, thanks for the question. The fires we had, and the word unprecedented was used so often. I mean, unprecedented seems to be common language now. We have floods, we have cyclones, unprecedented amount of rain, unprecedented fire. Is this what we should expect to see in the future? Maybe, these types of events. To answer your question, we have scientists in other universities right now taking water samples around Sydney, south of Sydney, to look at the downstream effects. We don't know what they will be. We think there'll be huge water-borne problems, oxygen sag, that's going to lead to probably fish kills, we think. But we don't know. But the science it starts now to understand that.
Yeah, could I follow up on that too? So, disturbance ecologists, fires. I was on the news a week before last talking about what we might learn from Australia and our landscape. We have similar latitudes, we have a similar ecosystem. This landscape is adapted to periodic fires. As we're moving to changing hydrology that Lisa talked about, and probably generally warming temperatures like we've had most of this month, we're going to see more fires. Okay, and so I try to think not to be the sky is falling. The response to that is to be proactive. So what we do on this landscape to minimize what happens in a wildfire is prescribed fire. Estimates are that about every dollar we spend on prescribed fire saves us about $7 in a wildfire response. But the problem is a lot of us don't like the inconvenience of smoke and roads that are closed. Well, we got to get over it. Okay? It's a lot more inconvenient to have your house burned down. So we need to be thinking ahead and be realistic about the way the world is changing and putting some money in now to prepare for increasing likelihoods of those kinds of events.
Okay, I'm going to, is this working? I'm having trouble with these things not working. I'm going to invite to end this session, end this discussion. I would like a student or two to ask questions or make a comment. Come on, students, come on. Who's in my class last term?
Hi, so as representing kind of students, one of my questions you guys mentioned, like, we're kind of the up in front, we're coming into the field, and I think one of the biggest challenges we face is we feel kind of out of connected with our leaders in power, because a lot of them are older, the older generation that we're trying to reach in that. And kind of, it's a broad question of how do you fill that gap, or how are we supposed to go forward and fill that gap between our leaders in power, older generations, and trying to get them on the forefront of new research and stuff like that, if that makes sense. I think it's kind of an open forum, just kind of filling that gap in that education.
Anybody want to take that on?
Lisa, do you want to answer it? Yeah, thank you for that question. I missed yesterday. I heard there was some controversy about people, pushing for particular political candidates. Bill said we don't want to be political. Yeah, we have to be political, right? A lot of the problems come from poor leadership. If you think about, and a representative democracy works when the people are engaged in the process. And if a Collier County Board of Commissioner made a bad vote and received a phone call from every single person in Collier County the next day, they would either never make that vote again, or they'd be out of the job. Okay, so we need to move beyond just, every November I'll go in and cast a vote on whoever sort of catches my fancy in the voting booth, to paying attention. And I want to encourage all you guys. Some of you are in my classes, right? Get rid of old people like me. You guys can run for office. You guys can bring the new. It isn't just trying to talk to somebody like me and convince me to think differently. Take my job if I'm in your way.
Echo that, become engaged and become the experts. Whatever it is you love doing, become an expert in that, because the decision makers need to be hearing from you. All of the people who are voted into office have responsibility to the people who voted them. If you're calling, if you're engaged, then you will have that. I thought that Daniel Andrews, again from the captains, Captains for Clean Water, that's an amazing story. He went, talked to the experts, went, talked to the legislators, and was like, wait, these things aren't adding up. What do we do to make that connection? And I don't think it's necessarily a generation or an age thing, but whoever is in office, making those decisions, voting for those people and becoming active. I spent 2 years in Washington, D.C. working in the administrative branch. That's another thing I'd recommend to anybody. Spend a little bit of time in Washington to understand how the government works, because we are all part of it. And if you don't engage and take part in it, then it is just it'll pass you by.
Okay, JULITA, do you have something to say about this?
In my opinion, as a person who work with local community and local authorities, I think that education is the most important nowadays. Because as I saw this example, the sewage in the stormwater, it is impossible. But if the child say, mother and father, don't do like this, I think it now is the best way to do something. People have to understand that the water quality depends on everybody, not only from politics and local authorities, but from everybody.
Okay, can I add something? Oh, sorry.
Sure.
This is my third best idea. The first is tailgate for science. This is for everybody. I'm going to call it change the game. If you're a Republican, change your party affiliation to Democrat. If you're a Democrat, change to Republican. If you're an independent or haven't registered yet, pick the party you disagree with the most and join them. This is the way we'll break down those tribal barriers and we'll begin to push everybody back towards the middle where we belong. I'm not joking. Change the game.
Okay, Nathan, do you want to have the last word? You gave the further.
I guess to inspire the future leaders down the back, you have the power in your pocket right now, mobile phones, and Lisa mentioned connection, absolutely. The power of social media is incredible. I am only just understanding now FaceTube. You know, it's a joke, FaceTube, obviously. But the power of social media is incredible, and you can get messages out there and be heard like you would know better than me, I'm sure. So absolutely what the other panelists have said, I think, but use the platforms, use the tools that you have. We're in the age of technology now. Embrace it.
Send out the message, change the game.
We're right out of time, so again, please help me in thanking Lisa, Nathan, Julita, and Wynn. Thank you all for coming. We'd love to have you. And we're going to possibly, is that right? We've got a film completed now of this whole event. And it'll end up somewhere on the web. We don't quite know where. But this is all documented, folks. So again, thank you all for coming. And don't forget, July on March on the 5th of March. Thank you.